right, we're back at it with another of my long to-read list. We're working through it. Last time I chose 2. In the meanwhile, I got through 4, so we're getting through it pretty good. It's cold outside. I've got my weird ass Mr. G travel mug. Let me tell you about these books I read. All right, even before we get to the ones I selected, I read Chrysalids in the meanwhile, and then I looked back and saw it was on my 150 list, so I'm counting it. I just read Chalky, and it was so freaking good. It blew me away. So I was like, I'm just gonna read another Wyndham. This is kind of the one that's a little, in the realm that everybody kind of knows. Maybe you would have read it as a teenager in school or something like that. And it kind of reads that way. It is pretty YA in that sense. It's about a couple of kids in a sort of post-apocalyptic fundamentalist society, and then they gain telekinetic powers, and it's sort of more about like the fear of these kids and not being able to reveal this like special ability, and kind of plays out that notion of living in this society and this fundamental society and having this like something unique about yourself. And then it didn't make me as excited as Chalky did. I still enjoyed it, but it vibed YA a little more. Like the themes were a little more understandable, forefront and blatant, which is fine, but it didn't quite wasn't as nuanced as Chalky was. But this might not be the need for a view. Everyone kind of knows Chrysalids, but it was good. I liked it. And then in the meanwhile, on my trip to New York and Philly, I read Hrabal's Dancing Lessons for the Advanced in Age. This one, so kind of about a sort of kind of like a drunken lout is just telling his, ribald stories of just all the beautiful ladies that he meets and kind of the adventures he goes on. It's sort of, and it reads exactly like that. It reads like a kind of drunken rambling. It's a single paragraph. It's quite short, but kind of jumps from image to image, story to story. Just kind of, as soon as he's reminded of something, he goes off on that tangent. So pretty amusing little novella in that sense. Pretty hetero, pretty, I wouldn't say misogynistic, but definitely like from that angle. I would say of the 3 Hrabals I've read, this is my least fave. What have I read here? I've read 3 previous. Closely Watched Trains, I Serve the King of England, and my favorite, Too Loud of Solitude. This would be the one I would recommend before, even certainly before that one, before most of these. But they're great. So Czech writer, and they're all smart and interesting, but they're not too demanding. Actually, that's why these like Hrabal novels are great. They're all not too taxing, but they're smart. They're all quite different. They're charming. They're all charming. And normally that would be like a bad word, but in this case, not at all. Probably my least favorite of the bunch. Still really great. So if you haven't gone through these Hrabals, I think this one has had a recent NMRB reissue, so it's findable. It's findable in the wild. It's findable at your local bookstore. But if you can find Too Loud of Solitude, that would be if you love lit and books and kind of a smarter take on like the disposability of literature than Fahrenheit 451 or something, kind of a sadder, smarter version of it. Great. But Dancing Lessons for the Advanced Age, still pretty good. And this is kind of a heavy NWRB day. Of the 2 that I had randomly selected for me, Hav by Jen Morris. This was spectacular. I encompass this in my sort of I call this the invisible cities genre. Metafiction, but sort of all taking place in a posit of like Eastern European, Western Asia style kind of fantasy. If you like Calvino, Borges, it's like in that realm. That Dictionary of the Khazars and all those kind of things. This is in that realm. Jen Morris was a travel writer, so she wrote all these incredible travel books about traveling all around the world. So then this one in particular, though, is different because written in the same style, in the same vein, but Hav is a city that she completely made up, and it very much vibes like a sort of like if you went actually traveling to like some Borgesian posit of a city, this is what would happen. So very inventive, very smart. Never read anything quite like it. The imagination of the city itself, it's kind of mundane because it's sort of like the city itself is sort of this amalgam of East and West, has like Greek influence, has Chinese influence, has Islamic influence, and it's all kind of in this city, this like nothing city that doesn't really have its own identity. It's just kind of like this collage of culture. And then in that, just kind of this world builds. The scenes of the roof race in particular, very interesting. The book ends with it's very interesting. It ends with a bombing of the city itself. Like the city becomes under siege, and then in this, so the first novel is called Last Letters from Hav. The second one comes back. It is the second one is Hav of the Myrmidons, and it's nobody will like that second one nearly as much. It's basically like after the bombing, kind of the excitement and exoticism of the previous city has all been wiped out. Sort of a city of rebuilding, but not rebuilding in a utopian sense at all, sort of in like a Russian, not Russian, but like Eastern European sort of fascist state sort of takes over. And I don't actually understand like the metaphor of what the book is saying. It's something I need to ponder a little bit more. But kind of the grandeur of and exoticism of the city previously is like absent in the second one, almost like erasing the imagination of the time before. I don't have the answer to that. Maybe someone could write their thesis on that, but especially Last Letters of Hav, the first one, and I think you can find just editions of that as well. But that was awesome. If you can track down copies of Jen Morris's Hav, highly recommended. It's awesome. And then my fourth in the batch, this next, another Andre Gide. This is an autobiography largely detailing his childhood from kind of what he can remember up until he becomes like a young man. And that's kind of the first bit. So a lot of it is just set in France and detailing just interactions with childhood friends, interactions with his family, kind of the death of his father, the relationships with his mother, and that kind of thing. So just it's very familial, very household, and even in one of the things I love about Andre Gide is that even in translation, this chock full of gorgeous sentences. It's really, really true of kind of his other books as well. Whoever translates them, maybe French just translates more evocatively, maybe just like what's inherent in Gide himself translates to beautiful sentences. Kind of the more of interesting, especially for the gay boys, part 2 of this book is when Gide travels to Northern Africa to Tunisia and Algiers, and it's sort of where he has his kind of like, gay awakening. The real scenes that are kind of described in The Immoralist, you'll find in here kind of the inspiration for that book, and especially for Oscar Wilde fans, he goes cruising with Oscar Wilde, kind of details all the stuff that got Oscar Wilde in trouble. It's all in there as well. So if you're looking for like the salacious bits, it's part 2 of this autobiography. It's in there as well. I'm a big Gide fan. Counterfeiters, one of my favorite novels ever written. Just beautiful sentences, even in translation. Very much ahead of its time in the openness and interaction and subtlety of gay relationships. It's very good. I wouldn't say I necessarily recommend it unless you're a Gide fan. Definitely do Counterfeiters first. Immoralists if you want something a little closer to the salacious. But whatever. It's still great. Andre Gide, I'm glad. I probably wouldn't have gotten to it if it wasn't selected for me in this randomizer, so just as well. And I've got more to read. Let's hit the randomizer and see what happens.
The Thought Gang, Tiber Fisher. Sorrows of Young Werther, Goethe.
Okay. You're in here somewhere. And you're right here with the other one. Alrighty, these are my 2. I'm excited about both these choices. I've been meaning to read this Goethe for a long time. It's kind of a hole in, especially for my love of kind of German lit, sort of literature that's very much led into like the modern youth zeitgeist. It's short. I'm excited to finally get to the Young Werther and Thought Gang. I kind of don't know much about Tibor Fischer, but I keep collecting them. This will be the first I've actually read. They all look cool. They're kind of often described similarly to, Pynchon or like that kind of smart, literate, but like sort of adventure-y. This one looks good, so I'm happy to crack it. And with that, I'm gonna get reading again. Plugging away at this 150 list. If you've read any of the ones I just read, let me know. If you've read any of these 2 that I've got coming up, let me know. I'm actually quite happy that I didn't have any duds in this lot, unlike the last video. So, I've been making some good selections, or the randomizer's been making some good selections for me. But getting it done. Have fun reading your books.